In each episode, Dr. Blackman and Dr. Lewis will tackle a different area of interest for Transforming Guyana. Join us for episode 1 of Transforming Guyana on June 8, 2022 at 10:30 a.m.
Well, good morning, colleagues, and welcome to Transforming Guyana. I'm Terrence Blackman, professor of mathematics at Medgar Evers College and a founder of the Guyana Business Journal and magazine. Today, I'm joined by Dr. David Lewis of the Caribbean Policy Consortium, Dr. Vibert Cambridge, Dr. Lear Matthews, and Ms. Rosalinda Rasul, the head of the Diaspora unit in the Foreign Services in Guyana. This effort, Transforming Guyana, is a series of programs which we hope will move to ensuring that all Guyanese share equitably in the national inheritance. It's a series of programs which we hope will ensure that Guyanese are healthy, well-educated, enjoy first world living standards in an inclusive, transparent, accountable democracy. It's a series which we hope will spark the imagination of Guyanese youth to create a future Guyana that is harmonious and holds together across the lines of race and class and ethnicity. What we intend to do is to spotlight the sort of brilliant thinkers, the doers, the entrepreneurs, the executives, scientists, scholars, and the man in the street who are and in the diaspora who are working to transform Guyana. And what we really want to do is to sort of pull back the curtain to sort of reveal what it will take for us to make our dream of one people, nation, destiny a lived reality. On this journey, my guide will be Dr. David Lewis of the Caribbean Policy Consortium. And I want to introduce Dr. Lewis to say a few words in this regard.
Thank you, Terrence. Welcome all friends from Guyana, from the Caribbean and internationally. Just quick housekeeping, Terrence. We've got our other speaker, Arthur Deakin. He tells me he is in the backstage. I don't know. There we go.
There we go. Sorry about that. I was just finishing up a call. Go ahead.
Good morning. Excellent. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. My name is David Lewis. I'm a bit of a Caribbean regional mix, but my first visit to Guyana, I am not Guyanese, unfortunately, was way back in 1982 as a student, and was incredibly impressed, despite the hardships of Guyana in 1982, with the talent of the people, the landscape and geography coming from an island to be on continental soil, and subsequently always kept an interest in Guyana, and in 1991 led the first private sector investment promotion mission from the United States under the Caribbean Basin Initiative to Guyana, already in that period of transition to an open free market economy, slowly but surely, and subsequently have been continued to be involved with economic development and energy work in Guyana over these past 3 decades. And back some years ago, a group of fellow Caribbeanists in the United States, in the Caribbean, including Guyanese colleagues, which many of you know, like Professor Ivelaw Griffith, we set up this virtual think tank called the Caribbean Policy Consortium, precisely to reach out to the region, to people in the United States interested in working on the Caribbean, and to the diaspora, the broad Caribbean diaspora here in the US, to discuss policy, research, civil society, business issues of relevance and engagement for all with regards to US Caribbean issues. And one of those, of course, have been that of energy in the Caribbean, and specifically oil and gas growth and development, exploration, and now marketing in Guyana. So together with the Guyana Business Journal, we've had some years now of producing commentary pieces in Guyanese regional media, in the US media, on these issues, ranging from everything to the development of Guyana as an energy producer country, what that means in terms of the economic development, the economic growth, the prospects for the diversification of different sectors in the economy, and of course also the concerns, given past experience of other oil-producing countries in the developing world, regarding ensuring that this is working to the benefit of Guyanese economic development broadly seen, and that both governments and private sector participants, and on the private sector side, both Guyanese and external, regional and international, play a positive and constructive role for that. And this goes beyond oil and gas. It includes all the key areas of development for Guyana, not only in the extractive sector like mining, but agriculture, education, everything having to do with human resource development and training, and moving forward little by little. And of course, there's been very positive news in terms of what the role and the participation of Guyana as a new oil and gas player. And one of the key people that we've been working with in that is Arthur Deakin with America's MI out of Miami, but with extensive experience in the extractive sector industry throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. And over the past few years, we've been doing a lot of work with Arthur on analyzing and sort of breaking apart what the oil and gas phenomena is in Guyana and what it means for the economic development of the country, not just the discoveries and the importance now that Guyana will be close to the #1 per capita producer in the world, the projections for the future, and also in terms of how that is being used in a variety of areas, the projects that are being discussed in terms of gas to power and a variety of other areas, but really kind of put Guyana in context, that importance as a new energy player, and what that means overall for the economy. So we're going to have a program with GBG of 12 episodes. This is episodes 1. We'll be meeting every second Wednesday of the month at 10:30 a.m. with a variety of different topics, which we will be sharing with you. So just to let you know, episode 2 will be Wednesday, July 13th, discussing the questions of sovereign producers and developing country rights to develop oil and gas sectors, also with a team of experts in this area. And subsequently, we'll continue August 10th, September 14th, October 12th, every second Wednesday of the month. The Transforming Guyana series will take place. So we look forward to participation virtually from Guyana, from the Caribbean, from the United States, and very importantly, from the diaspora. So Arthur, with that background, why don't you take us through some of your views and what you've been working on in terms of what we call that new energy bonanza in Guyana and what it means. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, David. Thank you, Terrence, for inviting me as well. Always a pleasure to chat about Guyana. Just as a brief background, I'm actually Brazilian, but have been working in the region for quite a bit now, and work for AMI, America's Market Intelligence. We're a market research firm based here in Miami, where we help energy companies and energy investors enter into Latin America, expand into Latin America. In any case, I've been chosen to set the scene a little bit in terms of the total resources found, revenues expected for Guyana. And it's not an easy task, because it seems like every couple of weeks Guyana discovers a new commercial well, and those revenues and estimates keep going up. So that's very promising for the country. Of course, it's a sign of optimism for things to come. But also with that comes a lot of challenges and opportunities for mismanagement that we all have to be aware of and hold the government accountable for. So just setting the stage, there's been around 30 total discoveries in the Starback block. I think the exact number is 31. Only in 2022, there's been 6 discoveries made. 5 of those were in the Starback block. One was the Kawa 1 well by CGX and Frontera, which is a good sign. It shows that there's commercial finds outside the Starback block, which we know is the most successful and most developed block in Guyana. That brings the total estimated or total barrels of oil equivalent to 11 billion in Guyana. Just in terms of putting it in context, what that means is the 16 largest reserves in the entire world. If you think about just 10 years ago, if somebody told you that Guyana would have the 16 largest oil and gas reserves in the world, you would have thought they were crazy. I mean, there was obviously expectations and hope that there would be reserves, but nothing to prove until 2015. So the speed of development has been unprecedented. We think the fastest development of an offshore resource in recent times. It's going to lead to 1.2 million barrels per day of oil production by as quickly as 2028. 1.2 million barrels. What does that mean? It's important to put things in context. That would make Guyana the 3rd largest producer of oil in the entire region, behind only Brazil and Mexico, but surpassing countries like Colombia and Venezuela. Of course, Venezuela is still up in the air, depending how they reignite their oil sector. It would make Guyana the highest producing country per capita in the entire world by far, higher than some of these super successful countries that we've seen in terms of hydrocarbon development, like Qatar and the UAE. It would 1.2 million barrels would also mean that Guyana would have the 17th largest production in the entire world, surpassing countries like the United Kingdom, like India, like Oman. So very, very promising news from Guyana's resources. 20% of the reserves in the Starback block are estimated to be associated gas. That's also super important to keep in mind as the world transitions towards the use of more gas, especially LNG. We believe at AMI that there's an opportunity to liquefy that gas and export it not only throughout the region, but to the US, Europe, and Asia. Of course, this is more of a medium-term prospect, but there is an opportunity for LNG and gas exports from Guyana. But it's also important that this infrastructure that's being developed to transport this gas be developed in such a way that it is transition ready. And what do I mean by transition ready? I mean that the terminals and the export facilities, etc., have to be equipped to export these low carbon fuels of the future. So renewable natural gas, synthetic methane, green hydrogen once it comes to fruition. So all of these things are very important for this infrastructure that's being built now to be ready to adapt to this changing world. If not, they're going to become obsolete assets, become stranded assets, and that's concerning. In terms of the FPSOs that have already been approved, there's been 4, right? 2 already operating, the Liza Destiny, which was the first one. It's producing, I believe, 130,000 barrels per day. The Liza Unity, producing around 220,000 barrels per day. So that's already 350,000 barrels per day. We see the third one is Payara, the fourth one is Yellowtail. Once those four are operating by 2025, we expect a total of 820,000 barrels per day. And then from 2025 to 2027, we expect around 400,000 barrels in additional production coming online, bringing it to 1.2 million. The size and the scale and the speed of the development and discover these resources, we haven't seen it in anywhere else in recent times. I think 50% of the total offshore resources discovered in the entire world have been in Guyana since 2015. So this has been really incredible. And with this excitement, it's also important to take a step back, right? It doesn't mean that Guyana is going to continue finding resources at this pace. I mean, it would be nice if they did, but it's unlikely. So it's really taking advantage of this investor momentum and this desire for oil and gas right now from the entire world to capitalize on getting the investment necessary to develop this energy sector, setting the right framework, being as transparent as possible to ensure that investors feel safe coming into Guyana. That is what's going to be needed to really capitalize on all these sources. I think I'm out of time here, so I'm going to pass it back to Terrence. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Arthur. You've really made concrete the promise and the potential of this moment for Guyana. And so I wanted to have, who is Guyana, who has kind of been bequeathed with this a wonderful gift from the gods, I suppose. And the only person I could think of who could really appropriately contextualize this person, Guyana, is Dr. Vibert Cambridge, who is the first graduate of Ohio University's Communication and Development Studies program. And Dr. Cambridge has been teaching and doing research and scholarship that's been focused in communication and development and social change in transitional societies for a very, very long time. And I think that there are few Guyanese scholars who possess the depth and breadth of his understanding of Guyana. So, Dr. Cambridge, can you tell us who is this person who has been bequeathed this great bounty?
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you very much, Terrence and Arthur and David and my other colleagues for being part of this important conversation. Well, it is mind-blowing. I'm certain that Arthur will share with us what this may mean in terms of translatable dollars, dollars per year, but we'll come to that. The big question is, who are we? We as Guyanese are very interesting people. We are an old people, for the want of a better word. We represent a particular constellation of humanity, a special constellation of Homo sapiens that arrived in this part of the world, according to Dennis Williams, the preeminent Guyanese archaeologist, maybe as long as 15,000 years ago. Recent archaeological excavations in the Bobis intermediate savannas, the Terra Preta mounds, have been carbon dated to show human settlement as old as 5,000 years old. So you had active human settlement, domestication of cassava and development of a culture. At the same time, the pyramids are being built in Egypt. It is always good to have that end of the Ice Age marker to discuss the development of Guyana and the role of various commodities in the Guyanese experience. The Guyanese experience of us can be broken into what I would call two categories: the pre-independence category and the post-independence category. This is important in kind of explaining the journey of who we are. The pre-independence stories would go back to the late 15th century with Europe's encounter with the Americas, and during the 16th century efforts by the Dutch to establish colonies or trading posts in Essequibo. The big commodity that is emerging at this point in time are things like tobacco, coffee, cotton, and then ultimately we get into sugar. And sugar brings with it this demand for continuous labor. And of that demand, we have the enslavement of our indigenous peoples initially, and then the substantial enslavement of people of African origins, substantial African presence as a result of slavery. Comes emancipation, but the demand for continuous labor for that commodity, sugar, continues. And as a result, we see one of the world's large population movement of labor, indentured labor from Asia, which ultimately brought about 209,000 folks from India to Guyana. That commodity and the consequences of that commodity created some transformations in Guyanese society, which we inherited. We inherited a notion of hierarchy. We inherited practices of resistance to hierarchy. We developed a practice of repression of feelings. There's a lot of repression of feelings in Guyana. It is out of this period is birthed the stereotypes, the foundations upon which Guyanese anchor their beliefs, their attitudes, and their behaviors. It was at a time whose commodities, whose practice led to the erosion of trust, or put it this way, the absence of the possibilities of creating trust. Divide and conquer were some of these tactics. But in the midst of all of this perceived negative churn, there's been this process of what I call the process of creolization, something that undermines ethnicity in terms of what tribe you are from or what caste you are from, in terms of the two big population blocks that inhabited Guyana. And again, in that positive space, one saw these various root cultures responding to a constant, the Guyanese environment, with its water, with its heat, with its pestilential conditions, with its short lifespans. Our root cultures have all responded to this given environment. In terms of the post-colonial who we are, we have 56 years of data, for the want of a better term, to reflect on. Someone has described this post-independence era as a moment of missed opportunities, when we did not make good of independence promises, when we did not create enough space for Guyanese to be self-determining. We saw that the post-colonial period was one of ruling, a continuation of a colonial kind of process, where a hierarchical dominant group would lead. That notion of leading and ruling, you could see it even in the construction of our political institutions. We saw emerging a political, a political sector, a political class that, along with institutions of the state, began a process of disengagement. My colleague, Lair Matthews, who is up next, and his partner, Ken Dans, in 1979, wrote a reflection on the state of governance in post-independence Guyana, where as the state grew in responsibility and took on tasks, it was eroding the traditions of community engagement. And they brought attention to the nation about the erosion of community, a process of disengaging the citizen from the process of governance of the society. In the post-independence era, the citizen really has become a client of the state, of the grand state. And there are problems in there as there are also opportunities. The way we practice politics in Guyana, and I'm still speaking about who we are, in terms of the way we practice politics in Guyana, political scientists have described it as an ethno-political set of practices. And this brings with it relentless, perpetual campaigning, requiring large war chest, use of practices of demonizing. And this is not a partisan discourse here. This is common to our political class in Guyana, straddles both of the political parties in Guyana. They are all good at demonizing each other. They are expert in sloganeering and in propaganda. They are, they've got competence in using a variety of media channels. But the interesting thing is that these two political parties, if you look at their manifestos when they go to the nation for election, invariably they're similar because they're born of a period. And that period, I would say, was the 1920s, just after the end of indentureship, when folks decided, well, we're not going to take the passages, we are going to stay here. And the urban working class that emerged out of the recently, less than a century earlier, enslaved Africa. There's a working class solidarity that envisioned a Guyana. So these manifestos all seem to represent that. And going with all of this are these patterns of catharsis. How do we get out of this stifling, dominating situation? How do I prepare myself to come and serve in it? And within these practices of catharsis, we see migration. We see immigration and the creation of the Guyanese diaspora. It accelerated in the 50s, but it has been a phenomenon in the Guyanese reality, at least throughout the early 20th century. So what can we become? What can we become? Based on what Andrew just pointed out, this is going to be the first time in my now appreciation that the treasury of Guyana would ever have this kind of predictable flow of resources. And we could predict it for about 40 years. That, I'm told, is the life expectancy of the oil finds in Guyana. For 40 years, we're going to have, even if it's 2%, the numbers will have to change, as Andrew points out, as production ramps up. But with these resources now, what will happen? What do we do? My point is the beginning of re-engagement. The beginning of re-engagement of the citizen in the process of the governance of Guyanese society. So I would want to say it is not only what we can become. We can become, whatever we want to become. But we can only become if there's engagement of the citizens. It is not right or appropriate for elite groups, be they central party executives or whatever, to alone define the future. Processes of communication that brought our ancestors here 15,000 years ago. This was a communication process that we call, a kind of alignment, strategic alignment, shared intentionality. It is a time now for Guyana to begin to think in a shared intentionality approach. And this calls for re-engagement. It calls for practices of participatory governance. And this is not a new thinking, because out of that churn from the 1920s and the 1950s, out of that period of time of repressed feelings, when the Africans in 1838 had to repress the feeling that you've got independence, but a whole new change is taking place in the society. Or the supporters of Cheddi Jagan in 1953, who would have thought that, here's working class solidarity. He gets into office and 90 days later he's kicked out. Repressed feelings. So we've got to deal with repressed feelings in a practice of governance that involves the citizen. And our thinking out of this churn has already given us something in the Constitution. In the Constitution of Guyana, under Article 13, it says, the principal objective of the political system of the state is to establish an inclusionary democracy by providing increasing opportunities for citizens and their organizations in the management and decision-making processes of the state, with particular emphasis on those areas of decision-making that directly affect their well-being. It is saying that we've got to have a national conversation, a more participatory thing. It is asking for a shift in governance, a shift in paradigm. And I think when my colleague, Dr. Matthews, speaks about diaspora engagement, we will recognize that the participation we are talking about is a global Guyana participation, Guyanese at home and in diaspora. So I'm going to stop here, transition it to Lear, and wait my turn to come back at the end. Thank you very much again, Terence.
Thank you very much. That it was that was a quick synopsis through who is the Guyanese, and I like the way that you ended in terms of it really kind of sets up the next question that I wanted. So this whole Guyana and its diaspora, and one of the immediate challenges of what you've just outlined somehow is that there's always been a sort of level of tension between the diaspora and home. And I wanted to ask for this grounding conversation to ask Dr. Lear Matthews, who is Professor Emeritus at the State University of New York, a former lecturer in the Faculty of Social Science at the University of Guyana, a member of the executive board of the Association of Caribbean Social Work Educators, an associate of the University of Guyana Foundation Board, and a member of the editorial board of the Caribbean Journal of Social Work, to kind of give us some sense, some hope of how do we, in a broad sense, think about the diaspora, the tensions, and then the questions of how do we mitigate those tensions so that Rosalinda can do the kind of work that she is tasked to do in knitting together home and diaspora. Dr. Matthews. You're muted. You're muted.
Okay. Good morning. You hear me now? You got it? Okay. Good morning, all. And thank you, Terence, for inviting me to be part of this presentation. First of all, I just want to make a brief comment on what Vibert said. He made reference to the monograph that my colleague Ken Dance and I did back in 1979, 1980. And the point of that work was that national development is community development, that the development of communities feed into national development. And at this time, the diaspora plays a very important role in community development. For example, these hometown associations in the diaspora, whereas they were seen as mere nonprofit organizations doing charity work, now they're being seen as playing an instrumental role in community development, sponsoring various community development programs in Guyana. Just wanted to make that point. Now, in the interest of time, my presentation will be a bit more structured. I'm going to talk about tensions at a time of social and economic transformation in Guyana. And I'm going to give a perspective from the diaspora. Now, tensions between the diaspora and home country, namely government administration and civil society, is occasionally discussed but not seriously addressed. We need to examine the cause, impact, and consequences of tension. The genesis of tension, I believe, centers around circumstances and patterns of departure from the home country, as well as misunderstanding of intent, distrust, false assumptions, and post-migration continuation of ethnic cleavage. Tension and disharmony, nourished by a tradition of ethnic mistrust, seem to have spilled over, in my mind, into the diaspora, perpetuated by ethnic enclaves, such as exists in New York. While some individuals wanted to return home after migrating, others had no hope of returning, and over time, the relationship between the dislocated and the homeland became remote, strained, or even imagined. Many people in the diaspora remained emotionally attached to the homeland, having a sense of obligation. They became exemplars of altruism, more interested in giving back, levering their position in their home away from home than tinkering with local initiatives. I would imagine that those with political ambition may beg to differ at this time. The give back process includes sending remittances and increasingly sponsoring community development projects. Among the issues that tend to cause frustration leading to tension, and I'll mention two, are bureaucratic delays in executing diaspora-funded programs and accusations that some diaspora organization executives have used duty-free concessions for personal tax exemptions. Evidence of tension do not go unnoticed. A former government minister warned overseas Guyanese to, and I quote, "Stop criticizing your country of origin." And a local resident urged the simmering resentment between Guyanese who remain and those in the diaspora must end before it is too late. This implies that both groups are perceived as culpable. For those who return to work in the home country, reported frustrations vary from unfulfilled promises to the inability to penetrate bureaucratic gridlock. A local Guyanese stated, "Don't mind," and I quote, I don't mind them coming back, but to demand certain jobs is not right." A returning visitor noted, "It is as if the visiting diaspora pose a threat to locals who see them as foreigners. Some returnees attempt to impose their foreign ways of doing things. Influenced by acculturative habits and industrial acumen acquired overseas, some returnees tend to believe that individuality and innovation should be valued over patronage, obedience, and deference. Others may denigrate local cultural values and community norms, but the expectations and experiences of those who return do vary. The Guyana Cultural Association, under the leadership of Vibrant Cambridge, adopted the concept of bridging, capturing the art of facilitating cultural connections. Earlier efforts to link the groups socially, politically, and economically have been less successful. And this seems to be Guyana's most exhausting and vexing challenge. Understandably, lack of some resources locally, organizational structures, and political reality often preclude ideal partnerships. The country's future is in the hands of youth, I believe. Some second-generation Guyanese immigrants may feel alienated from aging diaspora organizations in the diaspora. Some of these organizations, in partnership with local businesses and the Guyanese government, have recently begun to play a key role in sponsoring educational and skills training of young Guyanese in traditional emerging sectors. This is encouraging. An important question to ask is what provisions are being made to include the local content in the local content policy, those in the diaspora interested in investing or returning home? If so, how will this be accomplished? It is important for us to understand that the diaspora is not monolithic, but differentiated by traditional group identity and acculturation. Some are bound by emotional attachment or an interest in nation building, while others, more political, tend to dictate from afar what must be done to improve conditions. Tension is likely to subside if emphasis is placed on recognition and accountability of stakeholders and not blame. We need to rethink the way we communicate. Threats between persons in the home country and the diaspora will only increase tension. Focus should be on measures to articulate the public good in the long term. All stakeholders should be given the opportunity to lend a voice to what the country should look like in 2050 and beyond. To what extent should the diaspora, with its representative groups, have a stake in this, if indeed inclusion is viewed as cornerstone of democracy? The diaspora interest in election reform should not be interpreted as outside interference, but a genuine effort by those who remain loyal to the country to ensure civil society's participation in social and political change. One of the things that is quite upsetting is that, and I'm happy that Rosalina is here with us, is that there have been much anticipation by the diaspora to have a diaspora engagement document, policy and strategy document. So far, the diaspora, people in the diaspora have been very disappointed because that document has not been made available to the public, even though there's some evidence that a document was prepared. Okay, so that would be very important. In conclusion, I believe that courage to have difficult conversations about tension and inclusion resonates as a beacon of hope in this seemingly fragile transnational relationship. As we navigate this journey, we must emphasize the urgency of a well-crafted, inclusive emphasis, diaspora engagement plan. I thank you. We can have further discussion in the question and answer period.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Matthews. I think this is, as you, Rosalinda Rasool, you have a hard job. And that's kind of why I wanted you to sit with us here today. For those who don't know, Ms. Rosalinda Rasool is the head of the Diaspora Unit of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation in Guyana. She is currently overseeing all of the diaspora affairs of the country. And prior to assuming this role, Ms. Rasool has worked as a corporate executive in many industries in the private sector. And she has over 12 years of experience in corporate administration management and commercial operational affairs. And I think I was very impressed by the very first diaspora conference that you organized when you came in, and I've sought to follow the work that you've been doing. As you know, that there are these, I wanted Lear to speak to these questions of tensions, but I also wanted you to be here to talk about, what you have been doing. I know that you started to work on a database. I know that you've been engaging a number of people across the space, and I wanted you to kind of share the work that you're doing within the context of this broader discussion. So, Rosalinda, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much, Professor. And I am extremely delighted to be on the program. I have to tell you, this is a very interesting, thought-provoking forum, and I don't think 10 minutes is going to do any justice to the discussions, which are very lively, and of course, provide for some very good feedback in terms of diaspora engagement. I've been listening particularly, very keenly to all of the presenters that went before me, particularly Mr. Matthews, which I thought was very interesting, and I'm quite sure that a lot of the persons in the diaspora has a lot of questions. But there are several things that I need to say. First of all, when it comes to our role here in the diaspora, and what I've been doing for the past year that have been in the position or acting as the head of the diaspora unit. First of all, just to make a few things very clear, we have not, or the unit has not put itself out into the public domain with high glitz and publicity. There is a very good reason for that. And the reason why some persons, I should say, may not have seen us in the public domain, it's really because we were more focused on getting a lot of work done and putting a lot of structures in place, which we saw was missing from previous diaspora engagement or even attempts in the past to get the diaspora actively involved in Guyana's national development. And the last thing we wanted to do was to go on a high publicity stunt and to appear on every social media platform or on every media or a newspaper, but then there were no substance, no measure or no structure to what we were doing. So we actually decided, what the best thing to do is to start getting those structures in place. Exactly as Mr. Lear talked about, whether there are bureaucratic challenges basically that the diaspora would have faced, what are some of their detentions basically, and we needed to act on that. So we started doing quite a lot of work with various diaspora groups, and particularly a lot of the individuals that have been coming to our office on a daily basis, sometimes 10 to 12 meetings on a daily basis to engage the diaspora in their interests and projects and how best we can facilitate it. Now, just to quickly state it, one of the first things that we needed to do in our work was to define the engagement itself and to have those virtues or the core values that guides us. And we put on paper that we needed to be inclusive, non-political, professional, development or country-driven, transparent, and results-oriented. And that basically governed three basic areas of what we do, which is to communicate, to engage, and to facilitate a lot of diaspora projects. This is exactly what we've been doing over the last year. We have lots of projects and interests in pretty much every single sector that you can think about. And we didn't just receive those projects or those interests and point people to various directions. We literally walked alongside them every step of the way to ensure that if there were any challenges that they were facing, we would come in to help remove or mitigate some of those challenges, basically where they're having problems and when they were engaged in land authorities or the tax authorities on an area of interest. If they needed to talk to go invest on incentives for investing, we were there, we were sitting in every meetings, and we were facilitating that process, coming alongside. Additionally, we were able to help quite a lot of Guyanese in their consular matters, basically. And although they are agencies and departments that are set up for that, we would literally come in to help the process, particularly if somebody would have documentation issue, basically, or their documents are stuck for a long time. In the process of doing all of this, we were able to see where some of the systems can be improved and, how can we make it better for the diaspora. And that's exactly what we started to focus on and working with a lot of the agencies here in Guyana to ensure that the delivery of or the customer service that is given to the diaspora actually is improved. Now, addition to that, the workload became more voluminous. And so the next step was to restructure the unit itself. And I'm happy to say that we are at the point of literally, let's just say, going a little bit public now, because we have set quite a lot of measures in place and structures in place that's going to literally move a lot of diaspora projects and interest to the various sectors and stakeholders that they need to get to in order to make them realities here in Guyana. And the diaspora will now begin to see more faces to the diaspora unit, and they're going to see a lot more communication engagement, because we actually brought on somebody on board to deal with massive amounts of communication with the diaspora on all the different platforms. And what they will see is a chronicle of a lot of the work that we would have done from the time that I came to the unit to current, there's going to be that history, so persons will see, well, okay, for the past year, this is exactly what they've been doing. With respect to some of the tensions that Mr. Lear mentioned about, all very valuable indeed, and we acknowledge that there have been over the decades various tensions for different reasons. Those are something, unfortunately, that can be resolved. They can be resolved, but for those with the expectancy that it is something that can be resolved overnight, it's not going to happen, because, of course, it takes dialogue and it takes understanding from both sides of the spectrum, basically, to do that. However, I should point out that in our engagement over the last year, we have not, and I'm being very honest about this, we have not come into contact with anyone who has ever said that they have felt, one, the unit itself has been discriminatory or has not assisted anyone on the basis of any other factor other than maybe something was not right with the project itself, whether it's on political affiliation or ethnic identity. No one from the diaspora that we have engaged in can actually point a finger to the unit to say that this is what we've been guilty of at any point. We are very clear about that, and we are very professional in how we deal with it. In terms of the relationship between the diaspora as well as the locals here, perhaps there are people who've been talking about it quietly or in their cluster, basically, but we have not encountered. And if we do, we are actually a little more professional to deal with the issues involved in the engagement itself to make it happen. And I think one of the strategies that we have to mitigate that, if I may just add that in my presentation very quickly, would be when the communications officer comes on and the information we present to the locals and even to some of the diaspora themselves, as well as what's coming out of the unit in terms of content for the diaspora, that's going to help to offset or to mitigate some of those tension and distress, basically. But for the last year or so, the diaspora unit has enjoyed the support of the diaspora as well as agencies here in Guyana, because we can literally send correspondence to a particular ministry or a particular agency with a specific interest of a diaspora, and they can be assured that they are getting the audience that they need. Their projects are actually moving. Some may be slower than the other, again, because like Mr. Lear rightly pointed out, there is some level of bureaucracy there, and I do believe some level of unprofessional, which I can assure you is being worked on. And I can tell you, we've been engaging the policymakers at the very highest level, and they are committed to ensure that some of those very bureaucracies are actually removed. And you will see that happening as we move along, basically in transition in Guyana. One, to make it more readily available for a different kind of fast-paced, more modern kind of economic transformation that is actually going to be targeting a lot of our diaspora, coming from more sophisticated background, more sophisticated banking sectors. And we want to ensure that we provide that level of service. So the diaspora unit has been working over the year to facilitate a lot of the interest to move off, like they say, that backlog, because one of the key problems or complaints we've received was a lot of persons in the diaspora would send projects and ideas to various ministries or agencies, and they've never heard from them. They don't know what's happening with the project, and we began to clear that up. As we gain the confidence of the diaspora that we are actually who we say we are and we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, we started to put the measures in place. We started to address the obstacles and the hindrances in the system, basically to make it more user-friendly. And if there are policymakers that we need to engage to talk about a problem that we had, and we've done that many times, we do so. So the diaspora can be assured that we're actually working towards their best interests, and they can expect now, with the diaspora unit being restructured, and as recent as June the 1st, they will see diaspora engagement going to a different, higher level, where a lot of their concerns will be addressed, a lot of information will be given to them, a lot of them will get access into discussing and sharing their ideas about national development.
Rosalinda, that is really a wonderful presentation, and I think that your kind of assessment of building the infrastructure that is necessary, I think, is something that is really necessary for folks to understand that there is a process in which we're building an infrastructure, and I hope that infrastructure will be something that leads to the diminution of the tensions and allows for, really the actualization of the full potential of the Guyanese diaspora in its relationship with home to to sort of move Guyana forward. What I wanted to do was to bring in, so this has been such an interesting conversation that the time seems to have been really running away from us. So I'm going to beg the indulgence of the audience to just go, because I would really like, having had a full round of the presentations, I wanted to give 2 minutes to David to just kind of maybe bring this together, and then ask Arthur, Lear, Rosalinda, and then close with Vibert, if that's possible. So, audience, please bear with us for a little longer than 5 minutes. So you have 2 minutes, David.
Thank you very much. Excellent coverage, Rosalinda. Really appreciate the ministry's involvement. Let me just point out a few issues that then the panelists can integrate into their final discussions, Terence. I think one of the key things Guyana as a society and also the diaspora have to now grapple with, particularly when we heard the metrics from Arthur, and I'm sure he's going to give us some dollar figures to reflect Vibert's interest on these volumes of billions of barrels of oil, is really the need to develop the engagement institutionalities and ecosystems, as I call it, with regards to business, and not just foreign direct investment business like the 800-pound gorilla Exxon, but all business that's coming into Guyana, both Guyanese, Caribbean, diaspora, and international. Yesterday, I was on a discussion with some people from Chile who are visiting Guyana. And a few weeks ago, I was introduced to the new ambassador of Spain in Guyana. And he was not just talking about the interest from Repsol, the major global conglomerate in energy from Spain, but just Spanish businesses interested in this boom in Guyana. And I think it's a challenge and it's an opportunity for a small population under 1 million that historically, as Vibert showed us, had been sort of closed off and restricted in those engagements. So there's a need for that, not just with regards to the energy world, but just in general, the boom we have in tourism, in construction, in infrastructure, in services, and so on, and the implications this has in terms of the people who are going to work on these new ventures, which includes Guyanese nationals, diaspora, and others. And the second point then comes to the key issues that Rosalinda has raised with regards to the work of the diaspora unit and the government. Some metrics would be useful, particularly for those of us who aren't Guyanese. How many are we talking about? Where are they? What is being done with them? Because I think that's going to be the key issues, and particularly the learning curve of other diasporas in the Caribbean. We don't need to cover all of Latin America and the Caribbean, but I would just say the Jamaica diaspora, the Haitian diaspora, and the Dominican Republic diaspora as three very good cases for Guyana government and population and Guyana diaspora to look at in terms of successful stories and not have to reinvent the wheel in terms of mistakes that were made over the past, say, 30, 40 years with some of those diasporas, and how the Guyanese experience can now build on that and use that as benchmark experiences. So those are the sort of two lines I just like to throw out there for consideration in the final thoughts. Thank you again, Terence, and thank you all for joining us. I'm not sure if we lost Terence, but Arthur, we can just continue in the same order. Arthur,
yes.
There we go.
Yeah, so Arthur and go ahead, and then we'll go to Dr. Matthews and then Dr. Cambridge, and then we'll close. So.
Sure. Yeah, thank you all for your comments. Very interesting. Learned a lot today. Yeah, I think putting in terms of dollar figures, it's a difficult thing to do, especially with oil prices fluctuating quite a lot. But if we're thinking about a $100 barrel of oil. Estimates of annual oil revenues coming into the country are around $40 to $45 billion, which is a massive amount, around 10x GDP of the country in 2019. Of course, not all of that's going to go to the government. Of that 40 billion, probably around 15 billion goes to the government in annual oil revenues. This is if we're at 1.2 million barrels per day. Sorry, I should have clarified that. So it's a very, very massive amount, $15 billion annually by the end of the decade. That will transform the Guyanese economy. There's no doubt about it. But I think what's still pending is this transformation going to be sustainable? Is it going to be done in a way that it's inclusive? Is it going to be done in a way that is transparent? I think those are three of the main questions that are still pending that are fundamental for Guyana to answer. But there's no doubt that there's going to be an influx of billions of dollars coming into the country.
Dr. Matthews, billions of dollars. How do we mitigate these tensions, and how do we bring us all together to move this thing forward?
Yeah, I think that first of all, I appreciate Rosalinda's the information that she gave in terms of what the government is doing through Ministry of External Affairs, and I know it's a very complicated issue in terms of how governments are viewed based on the tattered history of how people respond to various administrations. The perspective from the diaspora is that, first of all, I think it's important to have an admission, to make an admission that tensions do exist. And tensions are experienced by different groups in different ways. We understand that. But I think it's very important for us to listen to the perspective of both the diaspora and those in the home country. And there's been some misinformation or lack of information, sometimes deliberate deception of the way information is given. But I think that what's important is that the diaspora that's been really engaged for many, many years on their own through community organizations or individuals have been sort of feeling left out in terms of the communication with the government. So I think we need to look at this carefully. And again, I think having a firm diaspora engagement policy document is so important, because people are looking for some sort of guidance and some sort of connection with the diaspora in a formal sense. There are a lot of informal connections, people going back and forth, sending remittances and so on, but somehow it's sort of disorganized. I remembered there was some effort on the part of the government to invite diasporans to be part of establishing a database, and it was all set up. But then one of the problems was that they felt that the data was not secured. And so there was a pulling back. So this is one example of where, when we're establishing systems to improve the connection between the diaspora.
Yeah. And Larry, can I ask, in the interest of time, can I ask you to jump in here, Rosalinda? And just because I know at some point there has been this discussion of the website, something that connects. So I'm assuming that this is part of the infrastructure that you're working on. So if you can just share a few words on that and some closing remarks, I would be deeply appreciative.
very quickly, and again, thank you for having me here. I look forward to another engagement where we can spend a whole lot more time to talk about all the sectors and
We
all the
will.
works
This
and the
is turned
interesting
out to
stuff.
be
And
much
actually,
more.
yes, I totally endorse that actually, because we have so much more to share to address every single aspect of the discussion that was discussed here this morning. Very quickly, yes, we are still on stream for the website. It will get launched. We did not run ahead with that there because we needed dedicated persons to put content onto it and to make sure that the content that is on it is not something that is a rehash from newspaper articles, but really active data that's continuously changing, that is updating the diaspora, what's available, what the opportunities are. So those are very much on stream. You will see them coming public, like I said, very soon. And I mean very soon. We're just about concluding some of those there. And I want to tell you as well that just give us like more, I would say let's just about a month more, and quite a lot of the engagements actually going to happen. We have quite a lot of agencies that we're partnering right now to engage the diaspora on their skills transfer. For example, from moving them from like how you get jobs in Guyana, there are going to be some job fairs, for example, that's going to be taking place. We'll be collaborating with a lot of the recruitment agencies that are actually targeting the diaspora. And we have been working very closely, having those discussions with them. So when when there is discussion about, the diaspora involvement in Guyana, then I can assure there's so many things that are actually happening here. And that's why I would love to come back and go through all of them in greater details there, basically. But I want to end on this one note here. Absolutely no one in the diaspora is prevented from coming to Guyana or engaging the unit here in terms of their interests and their objectives, basically. There has never been a door shut on anyone's face. They just simply need to reach out to us. If they do have challenges, they need to reach out to us. Basically, we're literally going to be sending some information at the end of today on some new contact details and WhatsApp details, so that people can be assured that they can contact us any point in time on any challenges or for any discussion or engagement. We've already had some webinars where the diaspora has been participating in it to have a say in some of the crucial areas in Guyana, whether it's security or it's the banking sector, which is a sector that we've heard lots of complaint on, or simple things like NIS. And so I want to assure you, Professor and your team, that we have a lot going on in the diaspora, basically, in the unit, and we would love to share that in greater details with you so the diaspora can be confident and can trust us the process of what's happening to make it a whole lot better.
Thank you. We've been impressed by some of the work that you've been doing, and we will take you up on that offer. Dr. Cambridge, you're the dean here, and so we give you the last word before I will ask David to say thank you on behalf of the GBJ and the CPC.
Thank you. Again, thank you, Terence. Thank you, David. Thank you, colleagues. As Arthur pointed out, not only this is a lot of money coming down the pike, which in every way is going to be calculated. He raised the point that the important consideration here must be safety of the investor. Equally important is the safety of the Guyanese citizen. So that discourse has to be a horizontal conversation, not a vertical conversation. There has to be a conversation about the investor and the society in which he or she is invested, and their equal interests in safety. So safety is a big consideration, and the point about citizen engagement has been reaffirmed in the conversation points made by Lear and Rosalind. I must say something about diaspora engagement. It seems to me that it has been an elite conversation. That has been a conversation about professionals and PhDs and that kind of approach. Mexico's, their diaspora engagement also speaks to tradesmen. It also speaks to artisans. So I would like this conversation about diaspora engagement to be explicit, that it is for all sectors of Guyanese skill and competence. And secondly, I would like the diaspora engagement unit to be proactive. Tell us what is needed in sectors. We hear a conversation about individuals who are showing their entrepreneurial skill. They love their give back. But there are many of us like me who would like to know where we can more effectively direct our assets or resources. So a proactive response from the diaspora unit, which says in agricultural sector A, going with these exotic greens. We would like such and such over this time period. We have various schedules. A diaspora engagement thing has to be strategic. So thanks, Rasul, for giving us the introduction to the act. Now, please give us the framework to build upon. Thank you very much.
Mr. Cambridge, I have to get your number to invite you to a lot of the forums you've been missing, actually, because we have addressed quite a lot of that. Unfortunately,
Right.
we're not there.
And part of the reality is that I have been for 22 years engaged to this conversation.
And that is why we have not gone public, because of the same
And, we've just been spinning wheels. I am happy.
That's why we said we have not gone public, but we're putting the structures in place. We are aware of that.
So I'm happy to work with you for a de-elitized diaspora engagement. Something that's not only targeting the folks like me, right?
We have done that. I'm going to invite you to a lot of our forums.
My son-in-law is a master
colleagues, what I do see.
God bless you. Terence, thanks for this. And David, I think you guys have hit it out to the park. You're on to a good start. Thank you so much.
I want to thank everyone, and I think since I started, just for the balance, I wanted to offer David the opportunity to say the thank you and closing word. This has been a wonderful discussion.
Thank you, Terence. Thank you all. From the more regional perspective of the Caribbean Policy Consortium, it's a pleasure and a privilege that you allow us to engage on these Guyanese family matters, as my parents would have said decades ago, which occur in all our Caribbean nationalities. Absolutely. And I think the embracement, which is relatively new historically, of the Caribbean peoples away from homes as part of the home is really what makes the big difference now. And many have mentioned other examples. I believe that there's that opportunity now to really build on the resources, the experience that's developing now, the growth possibilities, not just in business, but in many other areas, and really transform the fact that as opposed to some of the other periods in history, we now have this wonderful technology to bring all these people together in different areas that we can really leverage in ways that did not occur before. And just one final point, our experience on that diaspora development leverage, if you will, on a per capita basis, small country, but very powerful. The Salvadoran experience with the US has really been transformative, where over the past 2 decades especially, we have now seen entire towns and cities in El Salvador developed from zero, from scratch, just by the diaspora involvement with the home country, roads, electricity, the whole thing. So there's roadmaps out there. I think the important thing, as everyone has mentioned, is the engagement, the bringing together, and the communication and the dialogue. We are going to be back online on Wednesday, July 13th at 10:30 a.m. discussing the issues of right to develop oil and energy in terms of countries' rights and low carbon strategies as well. And in our monthly programs, we will be covering more of these. And certainly on this topic, particularly, I would venture, I think we have a motion and a vote of confidence, Terence, to actually do a part 2 with more time and with more engagement. So thank you all for joining us. Terence, GBJ, everybody, Rosalinda, Vibert, Lear, Arthur, excellent showing. Thank you all very much on our journey.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, Terence, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We'll follow up by email, and then not just for July, but then maybe get some stuff out with little summaries and snippets and so on, as we've discussed with Jefferson.
Yeah, so it was an excellent discussion. Yeah.
And then let us know on those metrics, how many people